Welcome to the analysis of the poem A Legend of the Northland, written by Phoebe Carey. A Legend of the Northland is a ballad. Ballad is a song narrating a story in short stanzas. Ballads are part of folk culture or popular culture and are passed on orally from one generation to the next. In this poem, we'll see Saint Peter and a greedy lady. Saint Peter was one of the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ. He was a disciple of Jesus Christ. And a legend means an old traditional story. And this poem narrates the legend of an old lady who angered Saint Peter because of her greed. The setting of the story is in Northland area. The exact place is not specified, but the area is near the North Pole of the earth. Now let's move to stanza 1. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. In this stanza, the poet tells that Northland is a faraway place close to the north region, northern part of the earth, and there the hours of the day are few because the duration of the day is very less, as its position is such that the sun's rays reach for a very less time in winter season. So the nights are long in winter. The duration of night is very long in winter season. So in line number 4, that they cannot sleep them through, the poet wants to mention that people cannot sleep for such a long time. So what do? They cannot sleep all through the night because the duration of night is too much, too long. So how do they spend the night time? That's what we see in the next stanza. Stanza 2. Where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bears' cubs in their furry, funny clothes. Sledges means a vehicle pulled by reindeers to carry loads or passengers. To harness means to tie the reindeers with a rope to the sledge so that it can be used for transportation. Swift means something which runs very fast. Bear cubs, the young ones of or the babies of bears. Furry clothes here means thick woolen clothes. Explanation. The Northland region experiences severe cold conditions. It's a snowy area. People tie the reindeers to the sledges and then reindeers are used for transportation. He adds that the children look like young ones of a bear because they wear funny looking clothes made of thick woolen, which is like a furry skin of a bear. Stanza 3. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe it's true, and yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. In the first stanza, we saw that the duration of the night is too long and they cannot sleep throughout the night. So how do they spend the night time? They tell stories. In this stanza, line number 1, they refers to the word they refers to the parents or the elders, and them refers to the children or the young generation. The elders of the Northland region tell a strange and interesting story to the young generation. The poet says that he doesn't think that story is true. But if he tells the story to the reader, maybe the reader could learn a lesson from it. The story gives an important message. Stanza 4. Once, when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it, preaching, just as he did, Saint Peter, as I mentioned earlier, was an apostle of Jesus Christ. He was a disciple or a follower of Jesus Christ. Preaching means to give out to give a religious talk. The story is about Saint Peter. The story is about Saint Peter. When Saint Peter used to live in the world and went around preaching, means giving religious lectures or preaching the principles of Jesus Christ to the people, then an incident happened. Stanza 5. He came to the door of a cottage in traveling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. Hearth means fireplace where you do cooking. When Saint Peter was moving around the world, giving religious lectures to the people, he reached the door of a cottage where a little woman was making cakes. She was baking the cakes in the fireplace, in the hearth. And being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, he asked her from the store of cakes to give him a single one. Faint means weak, tired, famished. As Saint Peter had not eaten anything the entire day, he was very hungry and was tired. So he went to this woman who was baking cakes. He asked for one cake out of the many cakes that she had baked. Stanza 7. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. The woman was selfish. She did not give cakes from her store. Instead, she started making a very small cake for Saint Peter. But when she put the cake for baking, she looked at it and thought that the cake was too big to be given to Saint Peter. Stanza 8. Therefore, she needed another, still a smaller one. But it looked, when she turned it over, as large as the first had done. Kneaded means to rub the dough, to make dough from the flour. The little miser woman thought that the cake was too big to be given away. So she started making another smaller cake. When she looked at that cake, she again felt that it was as big as the previous one. Again, she was not ready to give this smaller cake to Saint Peter. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough and rolled it flat and baked it thin as a wafer. But she couldn't part with that. Scrap means a very short amount, small amount. Wafer, a very small, thin, crisp cake. Part with give. The third time, she took a very small amount of dough and rolled it. The poet says that she rolled and made it very thin like a wafer and baked it. But she was so greedy that she couldn't give that thin piece of bread to the saint. Stanza 10. For she said, my cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself are yet too large to give away. So she put them on the shelf. The woman justified her action, stating that when she ate the cakes, she felt that they were very small. But if she had to give them to someone, she felt that they were too big to be given away. She put all the cakes on the shelf of her kitchen and she did not give any cake to Saint Peter. Stanza 11. Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. Faint means weak, tired, provoke, make someone angry or cause to get angry. Saint Peter became angry. Why? He was very hungry and he was feeling very weak, and the selfish woman was not ready to give him even a small cake. This behavior of the greedy woman angered Saint Peter. Stanza 12. And he said, you are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter, and fire to keep you warm. Dwell means to live. Saint Peter cursed the woman and said that she was very selfish. She did not deserve to live like a human being. He added that God had given her food, shelter, fire to keep warm, but she had become selfish. She did not want to share them with anybody. Stanza 13. Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food. by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard, dry wood. Scanty here means very little in quantity. Boring means make a hole in something with a tool or by digging or drilling. Saint Peter cursed the woman that she would become a bird because she did not deserve the human form. She would become a bird, and just like birds build their houses by boring in the wood and collect very little food by working hard the entire day, similarly she would also work hard in the dry wood all day and get little food and make a small place for herself to live in. Stanza 14. Then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. As soon as Saint Peter cursed the woman, she did not get a chance to speak for herself, because that very moment she flew up to the roof through the chimney and flew out in the form of a bird, a woodpecker. Saint Peter's curse had converted the woman into a woodpecker. Stanza 15. She had a scarlet cap on her head, and that was left the same. But all the rest of her clothes were burned black as a coal in the flame. Scarlet here means a brilliant red color. When the woman turned into a bird, she was wearing a red-colored cap on her head. And this cap was there on the bird's head too, a red-colored cap. But the woman's remaining clothes had burned and turned black in color, just like coal. So the body of the woodpecker, the bird, also turned out to be black in color. Stanza 16. And every country school boy has seen her in the wood, where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. Country means village, rural areas, countryside. The people who live in the countryside, even the little children who go to school, have seen this kind of bird in the woods. They have seen the bird staying there all day and keeping on digging the wood with her beak to collect food. People who live in the countryside, even the small children who go to school, have seen this kind of bird in the woods. They see that the bird stays there all day and keeps on digging the wood with her beak to collect her food. Whenever any child sees this kind of bird, then his elders tell him this story. They say that the bird used to be a woman earlier. She was very greedy and she was cursed by Saint Peter and turned into a bird. From this story, they learn a moral, a lesson that they shouldn't be greedy in their life. They shouldn't be selfish in their life. Now let's have a discussion of the literary devices used in this poem. First, rhyme scheme. The poet has used rhyme scheme A, B, C, B throughout this poem. The rhyme scheme is same for all the 16 stanzas. A, B, C, B. Second, alliteration. Alliteration is the repetition of a consonant sound in two or more close words. In stanza 1, you can see in the last line, first stanza, last line, that they, them, through, th sound is repeated. Stanza 2 also we can see plenty of examples. In the last line of stanza 2, funny furry clothes. Stanza 3, you can see learn, listen, L sound is repeated. Tell, the tail, L sound is repeated. You can see plenty of examples throughout this poem. So we move to the third poetic device, that's repetition. Any word or sentence is repeated to lay emphasis on it. That's repetition. For example, stanza 1, you can see first line, the word away is repeated. Away, away. Stanza 9, and rolled The word rolled is repeated. Stanza 13 and 16. Boring and boring. Next, 4. Enjambment. Enjambment is running lines of poetry from one line to the next line without using any kind of punctuation to indicate a stop. The continuation of one line to the next line without any punctuation mark. For example, stanza 1, line number 3 and 4. Line number 4 is the continuation of line number 3. Stanza 2, line number 1 and 2. Stanza 2, line number 3 and 4. Stanza 3, line number 3 and 4. You can see many more. Next, 5. Simile. Simile is the comparison between two objects using as or like. In stanza 2, you can see children look like bears' cubs. Children are compared to bears' cubs. Stanza 9, baked it thin as a wafer. Here, the cake is compared to a wafer. Stanza 15, clothes were burned black as coal. The color of the burned clothes is compared to the color of coal, black color. Now, these are the literary devices used in this poem.